Hey Aditi, hi. Nice to meet you after such a long time. Welcome to the Synapse Pod. For all the viewers who are watching this, Aditi is a dear friend. We've known each other for some years, and she's a superwoman. To be very honest, she has worked with many companies and has multi-diverse experience, whether that comes to Web 2, Web 3. She herself has been a founder of a Web3 community called Superwoman DAO and has also worked on multiple smart city projects with the Indian government. As far as I know, Aditi is heading the community at CoinDCX, which is one of the biggest crypto companies out of India. So, Aditi, thank you so much for being here. It's a pleasure to see you after a long time.
So glad to be here, Chirag. Thank you so much. I mean, when I every time I hear that introduction, I'm like, is that really me? That sounds like a cool person. So very, very happy to be here again and sort of share my story, which just keeps going in every direction that I find. So there's a lot of non-linearity to it, but I think it has fed in well to my curiosity. So very proud of and happy that I've lived through that.
No, no,
Looking forward to
so
an
glad to
amazing
have.
discussion with you.
Yeah, looking forward to it. In fact, many of our viewers, we did a podcast with a fellow female entrepreneur as well. And after that, we have picked up a lot of requests for other female entrepreneurs and community leaders, essentially women who are making a change, to come on the pod and share their journeys. I think India definitely leads a lot of it. So it's definitely a pleasure to host you.
No, 100%. I think it's great that all of these conversations have already started happening. At least social media is leading on that front. But we don't want all talk and no walk as well. So I think the idea is to, of course, bring in people like me who talk a lot, but also people like me who do a little bit of that work. And I would love to share my journey, how I did what I did. And if there's anything that anybody can learn from it, nothing like it.
Perfect. So, Aditi, could you, since you've done a lot, so I would like to start at the very beginning, right? If you could just walk us through your early days in your journey, starting your career, becoming a multifaceted expert in fintech, Web3, community building. How did all this happen? How did the Aditi we see right now come to be, and what has been the journey like?
Awesome. So I think for me, I have always intentionally or unintentionally been the kind of person who just takes one step at a time because I don't have the sort of discipline to actually go through and plan out an entire journey. How it happened is I am a 2018 graduate. I did my undergrad across campuses. Started at ISM Dhanbad, which Dhanbad as a city was something that I couldn't really adjust in. Then went to PDPU, which is a petroleum university in Gujarat. Not a lot of people may know about it first because it's also very new. The other thing is the great thing about them is they have a very strong research culture. So, and at that point, one thing that I'd learned about myself is that I was driven towards sustainability. In 2014, something, it was just picking up. Not a lot of people were talking about it. And I was like, okay, I'm going to do this because coming from a Marwadi family, I really didn't want to look at the traditional businesses. Also, I didn't think I'm the kind of person who would thrive really well in a very structured sort of an environment. And one thing that I knew about myself was that probably I didn't need I just needed exposure to the right people, to the right resources, and to the right city, right? I was like, okay, I'm not someone who's extremely obsessed about a certain kind of a college degree or a certain kind of a course. I was confident. I mean, even during school days, I think I've been very competitive from wanting to be the head girl and then win awards and all of that. I was very similar during college as well. Started with chemical. Then at one point, like I said, the research culture at PDP was very, very strong. I had the opportunity to do multiple international internships. One of them was at Cornell University. I was studying sustainability, and I wanted to join their food and brand lab because I was already working on a food waste project. That happened when MIT Media Lab was doing their first India initiative in the country. They selected 200 students from across the country to come and work on several ideas. And I was working on a smart dustbin project, which, by the way, was there at IIM Ahmedabad's mess for some time. And through that, I went to the food and brand lab. That was my first exposure of working in that sort of a research environment, right? I'd done a couple of international internships before, but they were more structured in a way that I would be studying chemical engineering or some sort of a branch or like a, subtopic in that domain itself. There, I first got introduced to the idea of behavioral science, right, which was not a term that I'd heard of in India.
Mhm.
And then through that, behavioral economics, which is essentially the study of how do you influence customer decisions,
Yeah,
consumer decisions, without changing the economics
yeah.
of products. And that seemed like something very interesting because I realized at that point that I would do well in marketing, and my interest also lied there. So that's what I studied. Then I joined in as a visiting researcher, as an intern only in the same lab on the director's recommendation, and spent almost a year on and off at Cornell's campus.
Mhm.
After that, once I had a PPO offer from my campus, but I didn't want to go through with that because by that time I'd realized, okay, that this is not me. And I had this opportunity to work on an observational data research project that Chicago
Mhm.
Board School was leading in India, which essentially required me to travel to 6 metro cities, be there for a month each, go visit Starbucks 4 times a week, and then go to a five-star restaurant twice a week, all on their paycheck, all
Mhm.
on their bill, and I would actually get paid for that. And then I just had to sit there for a certain number of hours. We'd actually quantified a lot of actions into data points. I had to observe
Mhm.
that and detail it out. Analysis part, I was involved in a little bit. Now that was the first exposure to me doing something which was not a lot talked about. Also traveling, also meeting a lot of people, and that's when I decided that okay, maybe I want to do something which is new and all.
Mhm.
During this entire research stint, I actually happened to be in Bangalore, and I have the true peak Bangalore story where I actually bumped into the first founder that I would eventually work at a coffee store, at a coffee shop or
Wow.
something, I think, at that.
Wow.
And she was there at the bill counter, and she was talking about something and to someone, and then she was mentioning Harvard and like how she was the gold medalist in IITB, and I'm like, okay, this is the woman I want to work with. She teaches me everything that I want to know.
So
And then
you
I
bumped
actually
into a superwoman randomly in a coffee shop, is it?
yes, but that's so common in Bangalore, right? And then I went up to Kushbu and I'm like, yeah, I want to join, whatever you're doing. And fortunately, she was just ideating. It was just her and her co-founder at that point who were ideating about Carva, a fintech startup, which they were building on an early wage access model, which would essentially be a lending model and salary advance, but how you package it, the wrapper that you create on it, and how it really helps these gig economy workers would be the offering, the differentiator.
Mhm.
Although I was not very enthusiastic about fintech, to be very honest, because my father comes from a field where he has an automobile financing firm, so I see that lending side of it, but that was the non-glamorous part.
Mhm.
So that's how I just ended up in fintech, and from there, from Carva to then taking a break and doing something of my own called Loopbox, where I wanted to create an ecosystem of reusable packaging, hyperlocal. That didn't really work out. COVID happened. At the time, FamPay was there, so I joined as their first, like an early team member in the growth team, the first person in the growth team.
Mhm.
Essentially led that for them for a year. At FamPay is when I really realized the value of community. Essentially, before that, everyone that I talked to was like community is a retention mechanism.
Mhm.
You do it once you've acquired users, and then you sort of entertain them so that they don't drop off. Or in fintech, it's a mechanism for non-transacting users who are either not doing the
Yeah.
KYC or who are not transacting, but they've come on the app. Let's give them
Yeah.
something to do. But because COVID had happened, the card delivery for FamPay was delayed. The GTM was very phygital. The planned GTM
Mhm.
at that point was very phygital that we'll do Zoma Land like events with Gen Zs and all. Now you couldn't do any of that. So what do you do? Because you cannot stop acquiring users. So that's where the
Mhm.
thought occurred. We all discussed together that let's start working on a hype community. Sort of a thing, and that was my entry into really looking at community, into community-led growth models, into GTC, which is go to community frameworks, all of that. In a year's time, FamPay was able to, in less than a year's time, FamPay were able to lose 1 million users. Also raised the biggest series at that point. Lots of learning, honestly, like a blitz-scaled experience in terms of learning and growth for myself at FamPay. After that, again, that's that itch that you want to scratch, right? The entrepreneurship itch returned. And I was like, okay, I joined EF. There, I wanted to work on a female health related idea. That did
Mhm.
not pick up.
Mhm.
Very clear reasons, my lack of understanding, my lack of insights and network in that field. I was a founder at that point who was 100% driven by passion because I'd
Mhm.
seen my mom go to a really bad hysterectomy experience. My sister had a bad time with PCOS. But I was not the right person to build in that field at that time, which I realized through my experience. So I would still say it was a very productive learning.
Mhm.
But while that, what was happening is I also wanted to, when you're at an incubator like that, you want to constantly look at the green pastures and the green gaps and the areas. So I realized I cannot talk to a founder and get those learnings in one call. I
Mhm.
cannot join someone full time. That was a requirement of EF. I started
Mhm.
consulting. So I consulting a friend. That went really well. Then he referred me to another friend. I'm like, okay, let me pick it up. It doesn't hurt. And that's how I ran 4 clients in a month. And I was like, okay, now there's an organic uptake to this thing, which I didn't really even start with
But
the
what kind of consulting? Do you mean like startup consulting? How to get
yes,
started?
yes.
Okay, got it.
Yes, so growth consulting for very early stage startups.
Okay.
What I was able to do it because I've become a little bit of a generalist with my FamPay, Carva, and all the other experiences. And early stage startups, essentially, when they're starting, it's a very small team, right? It takes some time to build a full time team. You have to
Hmm.
go through that passage of riot of taking those couple of months, but you cannot
Hmm.
not build in that time, right? So you need people who will come and then expedite that process or set up the SOPs in that duration. That's what I was doing for them, and that's what I realized a lot of early stage founders needed.
Hmm.
So Hamid was the first startup, an Antler portfolio at that time. Started with them, then more clients came in. In 2 to 3 months, I realized I had more. clients coming in, then I could actually serve, because it's a lot of
Hmm.
context switching also. Like in the
Yeah.
morning, I'm consulting a fintech startup, then there's a social Gen Z startup, then there's an edtech. Of course,
Yeah.
I'd standardized it and narrowed it down, but again, it was a lot. So in 2022 Jan, I incorporated my firm called Moonshot Consulting, and then last year, November, was also fortunate that I got an acme hire offer. So sold it to a US based company, chilled for a bit, honestly. And I was speaking at World Economic Forum this year in Jan, also hosting an event. That's
Was
where
it regarding the consulting is itself or?
no, this was regarding Web3. So
Okay.
during the whole consulting period, what I
Yeah.
realized is, because I was doing a lot of growth in community consulting, my transition to Web3 was very transactional, right? I was doing community for Web2 startups.
Hmm.
A Web3 company approached, they're like, we'll pay you thrice the amount for the same thing that you're doing. Because at
Yeah.
Fante, I learned how to operate and build and set up Discord, which at
Yeah.
that point, not a lot of people did. So I was
Yeah.
like, okay, cool. I'll jump ships. I have no loyalty to anybody. Like, I will do that. But once I got into it with that first, that's when I really started liking and like sort of understanding, even if not liking, I was like, okay, this is something that I should know, right? I mean, it's not becoming this huge for no reason at all. It cannot all be hype. There has to be
Hmm.
some merit to it.
Correct.
And after that, after getting my first Web3 client, is when I started learning and thinking and reading about Web3. All of that
Hmm.
happened in 2022 while consulting. Superwoman was also birthed during that period from a very random event. I don't even know who coined the name Superwoman. Uh, Somebody just named it. I put it on the WhatsApp group, and then the community just came about, which is over
Wow.
3,000 people now. But yeah, this year at YF, I came in touch with some of the officials from Maharashtra government, and then whole smart city conversation started happening. And I was like, I have certain ideas around fintech, cluster, sandboxes, SEC policies, and that worked out. So I'm
Hmm.
currently consulting them and then leading communities for Octo and CoinDCX. So Octo is a DeFi product of
Yeah.
CoinDCX. So yeah, I work in community for both.
Got it. That is actually a very power packed journey. In a very short time, you've covered. Oh my God!
That's
Like,
sarcastic, I feel. It's not just.
no, no, it's not sarcastic at all. It's just like so many a times. Like, so I've had a not exactly a same journey, but a similar journey in which I've dabbled my hands in multiple things. It's just I realize that whenever you touch a space, it's like a blue ocean, and you have to start from zero. But there's a certain point in time where you realize how many times can I start from zero, right? Uh, so many spaces, so many new sectors, and it's just never ending. And technologies keep on coming. Things keep on happening. And so, how do you figure out in this ups and downs and diverse areas of accomplishments? How do you mentally channelize your energy, and how do you figure out that, hey, this is the space I want to go after, and this is the amount of time I'm going to stick around before switching context? Because context switching is a real bitch, right? It saps in your everyday willpower whenever you're waking up, and you're always hunting for the next dopamine, right? What to do, how to do. So how do you manage that?
I think if it were not for the context switching bit, I think I would have still be going strong with my consulting firm. What I started learning at that point, that the whole context switching thing was getting to me. I was also starting to get the backseat passenger feeling, where I was like, okay, we're doing a lot of things, but whenever something goes right, it's the team, it's the company. And that's the model that I put myself into. I was a consultant, so there was nobody's fault. But the feeling that I was getting, I was also feeling it's like, sort of execution is a muscle that you constantly need to exercise. And
Mm,
I was starting to feel that I'm not doing that enough. I'm not learning enough.
mm,
So, being the kind of person inherently that I am someone who gets bored very easily, but I'm also someone who gets interested in something or curious about something equally easily. So,
mhm.
switching has to be led by two things, right? I have to get bored of this thing and I have to like this thing for that
Yeah.
transition to happening, which almost always happens simultaneously and in a very symbiotic manner.
Got
So
it.
that sort of makes the transition easy. The other thing is, I also come from the school of thought where I'm like, hey, before I turn 30, I have no dependencies. I have to thank my parents for that privilege, where I don't
Mhm.
have to think of I need to send money back home or what my parents will think if I try this out or if I travel for this or if I meet these kind of people. The first time that my father was ever concerned about the kind of people that I'm meeting or how I'm going to deal with them was when I started working with the government, because he was like, not to say bad people, but they're like, hey, you have to be very diplomatic and politically correct. Before that,
Yeah.
he never asked those kind of things. So
Yeah.
that's what put me in a very comfortable position to take decisions, sort of feed into my curiosity. I'm like, oh, Web3 is the new thing. I'm going to try that. Oh, AI is the new thing. I'm going to start learning about that. Oh, fintech's doing well. I want to work at a startup. I'll go do that. So that has been the essence, honestly, of my journey and story so far. To put it in a gist, it doesn't feel like work to me. I think
Mm.
even today I have that energy where something new will come up. I probably may not leave something that I'm doing right now, but I will make time. I will somehow figure out a way to actually read up, learn about that, or attend events or meet people. So that is one thing. Second thing is, I've essentially been this growth community person only, just in different fields. So my expertise has primarily remained the same, more or less. That
Hmm.
hasn't changed a lot. The fields have changed, the domains have changed, and the platforms have also changed, right? At Carva, I was doing growth community in a different way. At FanPay was in a
Hmm.
very different way. Here also, like at DCX, these are Web3 platforms now. But see, when you look at these, the frameworks more or less remain the same.
Hmm.
The
Hmm.
platforms just add up on the ease of it, on the attribution of it, and thousand other things. So that way, it hasn't switched so much as well. It's either going to be Alti's working on growth or community, or she's working on a startup, which has an add-on element of research. But
Yeah.
even founder, my priority or like my expertise would be again growth community and
Yeah.
generalist jobs. So
Makes
that.
sense. No, it makes sense. So you've actually dabbled around the same theme of growth and community, just in multiple varied sectors, right? And I think and I've interviewed a lot of people now, and had a chat, had a close conversation with a lot of entrepreneurs, and there's one trait that I've seen common in my folks as well as people who I've talked to is curiosity is the main driver, right? Where exactly what you said, like you wake up, you see something, and that thing is significant, right? In your mental framework, it will cause some change, and you really want to hop on, but then you realize, hey, but I have other things too. At that moment in time, figuring out the will to actually jump on and start learning and reading this phase of continuous growth mindset, right? um, where does that energy come from, or is it innate for you, or is it something which comes from your childhood, because maybe you were a very excited kid who would get excited when you see things. So what I'm trying to deep dive into, has Aditi identified the source of her curiosity?
Um, I think innately, like for the longest that I've known myself, honestly, I have been this person, right? You know, this over enthusiastic person, sometimes termed as a teacher's pet for asking too many questions, sometimes termed as this over enthu best friend who's best friends with everyone because she talks too much and talks to everyone. Who's also very competitive sometimes because I just don't want to be good at one thing. I want to be good at
Hmm.
everything to the best possible thing. Of course, there are lots of negatives also that come with these things, and I personally have. But I think that's who I am because I will deal with having to work hard for learning something new rather than having to deal with the FOMO of, or the feeling of feeling left out in something,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
Say Web3, I didn't get into it and it would have become really big. And I had a flatmate, say just a random example, who was doing okay, but now she's doing really, really great. And she did that. Now I don't want to deal with that feeling that, hey,
Hmm.
man, when the time was there, I didn't take an action, or now I'm feeling left out, or I didn't upskill myself or upgrade myself enough. Because what is
Hmm.
stopping me really, right? I have all the resources at my end. I have
Hmm.
no limitations. And if I can't do this much, that I continuously grow. And my idea is I don't have to always become an operator in anything that new comes, right?
Hmm.
But I at least need to be aware because I don't know when a time will come where I'll be able to draw a tangent or draw a parallel from that field to what I'm doing right now.
Sure.
And also, fortunately, it so happened that the field that I worked in, it's gradually just grown more and more important. In the trajectory, if you see, right, community is something that Web3 as an industry now values a lot. Even
Hmm.
before product, they'll be like, "Do we have a community?" So
Yeah.
what I was doing felt now it feels a little bit less important in the Web2 side of the world than it does in Web3. So I feel okay. I had to make that switch. That was natural. It was sort of a natural progression. Now, when I look at government, some of
Yeah.
the policies, some of the thoughts that we're discussing with, and it's funny how I brought about the whole nation state idea the other day in a
Yeah.
conversation, and they were all like, "Hey, yes, we want to look at citizenship in a form where there's a community sort of a thing,
Yeah.
because there's a smart city in Korea, Songdo, and it's known to be the smartest city in the world. The
Okay.
only one problem that they're facing right now is lack of community. That a lot of expats have come in, but they don't like living there because they cannot really mingle with it. And these case studies have come up. So that kind of conversation where you're in a room with some government officials and you at least pitch the idea of a nation state or of community citizenship, and then they're ready to at least listen to it. Sort of says that okay, this as a field has also become important here. So
And why is it that people don't like living there? Because there's no sense of community, or
no sense of community. So
it's a very individualistic living, or what?
Sort of. So that Songdo, let me give you a quick picture, paint you a picture of Songdo. It's like a couple of hours away from Incheon in South Korea, which is the biggest city there. It's very well connected, right? Everything is connected by metro, walking paths, all of that. The city in itself is very, very advanced. You don't have there's centralized mechanisms for trash collection, like these vacuum sucking mechanisms and all of those. So technology wise, it's very, very advanced. The kind of citizenship that you have in terms of the digital ID model is again very advanced. That city was built to attract a lot of HNIs and a lot of expats, a lot of business people, a lot of international companies. So a lot of expats did move in and all. But what happened is when you have such a melting pot of a city, cultural melting pot of a city, you need to have that intrinsic community value, right? There's someone
Hmm.
who's from the west side of the world. There's someone who's coming from Middle East. How do they really mingle in? Technology, great. Do they have those local culture cafes and bars out there? Does the city have any community rituals of its own, things that they can talk about. Like we may banter and we may diss about in the Bangalore traffic every single day, but it's such an identifying quality to all of us
Yeah,
in Bangalore.
yeah. It's the
Mera
common theme.
Pajero, like a Pajero is a common theme for anyone in
Yeah,
Haryana. Fathers are a common unifying theme in Delhi. Tera baap kaun hai, mera baap kaun hai, right?
yeah.
That city doesn't have that, right? And that is an intrinsic community value. So that's a
It
very
does, but
interesting case
but
study.
have you noticed this in most of the cities which are new development, where essentially history is lacking, right? Or do you see people formulating their own subclusters where they latch onto people which are alike or the nearest closest resemblance, right? Like in US, I've seen Indians and Bangladeshis and Pakistanis all mingle together. Hey, we are one big gang as compared to the Goras on the other side. So do you see those kind of subclusters naturally forming, or does it have to be induced by community?
Think for things like these, someone needs to seed it. Once
Hmm.
they reach a critical mass of people, now we have 100 Gujus here in the US and we'll do Garba. We need
Hmm.
to reach that 100 people. One person needs to seed it. Now, that person could
Yeah.
be a city commissioner or that person could be an over Entu Guju who wanted to play Garba. So,
Hmm.
something like that has to be done, right? Which, of course, this is an element which is constantly debated now that I'm reading a little bit about smart cities and all. Often, that hey, how do we build this cultural value? Because these new cities are very high in technology, but they don't have historical significance, right? They don't have that kind of chaos that actually brings people together, the
Yeah.
value system, what's that? This is a conversation that very recently came up on my visit to Gift City also. So I was making an official visit to Gift City in Gujarat,
Hmm.
just to figure what they've done. And they've done a commendable job. For people who may don't know, the thing that stood out the most for me was this common tunnel infrastructure, where from your portable water pipes to your sewage pipes to your optic fiber network, everything would pass through that tunnel. So anything that needs to be put out or sent across the city or like transmission, you don't need to dug the roads. Even the trash collection mechanism was the same as I described for
And
Somdor.
these are like motorable tunnels, or
Some of
what
them
kind
are
of tunnel?
motorable tunnels, some of them are not
Wow.
for security reasons, like CNG,
Okay.
we do not have that. But of course, they've been built in a way, they've created like these inherent and innate flooding rescue mechanisms, all of those
Hmm.
things. So technology wise, we've done a great job. But one other thing that was happening there was again like, hey, why will people move here? Like you can get some of the headquarters. You have an IFSA, which is doing a great job in terms of providing subsidies and offers and benefits to fintech startups.
Hmm.
There's an SEZ also there. But why would people residences really pop up here or mushroom up here? That's when they said that one of the key things that they are also looking at is seeding a lot of events, right? Events in terms of bringing people together, hosting nights and events where you have these diaspora events. Essentially, that's what happened on foreign lands, right? It starts with that the cultural minging and the diaspora event sort of something. So they don't need a diaspora, but this is because most of the people who are moving to Gift City are still going to be Indians right now. But
Hmm.
a lot of mingling activities that are happening. I was casually discussing with someone, and they were talking about having shairi nights and stuff like
Hmm.
that, and having like a city activity plan. Literally, those dream city activity plans that we've seen in these country towns in like a US or Riverdale or something,
Yeah.
things like that. So they are looking at things like this. Now, I don't know if that will happen or not because that literally was just a one-time conversation. But I think it's significant to note that people are thinking about those things, and it's a challenge, yes. But will not, this doesn't mean that we will not build better infrastructure cities and all. We will
Yeah.
solve this challenge
Yeah.
by
In fact, I feel that community building in cities, right, or places of where people gather, is essentially very, very it's like you can't do without it, and I'm seeing many new founders, in fact old veteran founders as well, like Adam Newman, starting a company just on community building. So I don't know if you've heard about this, but his next gig is about eliminating loneliness from the American cities, where his startup is just like WeWork was about work. This is about living,
Yeah, I read all
where,
about it. I mean, the funding
right,
numbers are crazy. So I was like,
it's
okay,
so
I've got it.
crazy. Yeah, so it's like he's tapping the core value of human connection, where people just want to come together, live together, and all these values are somehow inherent in Asian cultures. Whether you say Southeast Asian families or Indian families, the sense of belonging in community is very strong, where the status game is much more reliant on the community rather than an individualistic show of wealth, right? So is that something which you're also seeing in these new age cities which you're working with, when you say you're working with the government, or have are they putting a scientific behavior methodology to designing of these community structures, or is it very random that hey, we'll do some shairi nights, we'll do some XYZ? So how do we measure whether community development is happening or not?
Yeah, so I'm working with one smart city project only, and it's at a very early stage, honestly, very nascent stage to start looking at, hey, how I'm going to build a citizenship model or how I'm going to program a community model to this. But of course, the thoughts, the plans are in the place. The roadmap considers that. Cannot talk much about it because honestly, the
Mhm.
discussions haven't happened on that side yet. It's
Sure.
more on the side of currently right now the boards, the SVP, like the LP creations and
Yeah.
all of those, and the investor and the stakeholder management and all of that.
Hmm.
But if you look at the other models that I've studied, and not even talking on a city level, talking just on very smaller levels, I think, see, the community building is a very recreational thing in nature, right? You need
Hmm.
people at the end of the day because who are you going to show off your achievements to? Who are you going to come back and rant to? It's all
Hmm.
about people and all of that. And some of the things that even if you deep dive into what people spend on or what people crib about, most of the things are always going to be related to other people. People
Yeah.
spend on a lot of luxury goods, that's a status thing. People spend
Correct.
on outings and all that's again to catch up with friends. People travel for new experiences, which
Correct.
if you go to an NYC and not having any people around, I will not have the same experience,
Right.
right? Now, if you see what people are cribbing about on socials, also for that matter, it's again coming back a lot to the value of community, whether it be dating, whether it be lack of people finding friends or people finding partners, accountability partners to go out and play some new sport with or do some new activity with. So it's very inherent across stages. Now that could be a neighborhood, it could be a city, it could be even a country level. To be very
Hmm.
honest, of course, it
Hmm.
hasn't penetrated that level for those conversations to happen, and it essentially at that level is not even called community. It's called something else. But
Hmm.
the feeling of identity, unified identity, and belongingness is there. From what I know, a lot of these new city projects, there's this one called Praxis Society, which is coming up in the US. They're funded by 16. It's a random model. It's a very very wild model where they're like, hey, okay, we're going to create a plan of a new city, and then we're going to find 10,000 residents, get money from them, and then we're going to go out of one of the states and say, hey, can you now give us a land to build a city? Because
Hmm.
security is an important thing which we can't ensure, but everything else we can. And
Hmm.
Access Society is actually a funded startup and they are building on it. And if you look at the roadmap, they've actually said we've acquired the 10,000 people and the early residents, and now we're going out and talking to state governments in the US to acquire that piece of land. And whose
Wow.
we will be a part of. So, you know that it's that level that the conversations are really happening on. And then there are some really smart people backing that idea also. So, if not 100% merit, there's a lot of merit to it, and it has started happening.
Wow. This is a new age of community formation. In fact, Srinivas Balaji, another guy who he started a nation state,
Yes.
which is a Web3 nation state, right? I would love to hear your thoughts on it and some details for our audience. What is that about, and how do you see the structures of DAOs fitting into the modern age communities?
God. So, so Praxis Society, the example that I just started, it is a nation state model. So, what you mean by a nation state? Essentially, what DAOs as a model sort of mean is a decentralized. So, DAO is a decentralized autonomous organization, right? Decentralizes everybody has some level of power in the say in the running of it. Autonomous because it runs on its own. You don't need a third party like a bank or a government to run it or look at the hygiene and the ops of it. An organization, multiple people together. So that's the whole idea that, hey, what if say 5,000 of us founders in Bangalore decide that we have the money, we want to go out and buy a piece of land in Hosur, build our houses, create our own clubhouse, also deploy some of our own watch like people like watchmen guards, security
Hmm.
people, all of that. Can we not really build a neighborhood, a society of our own? What does it
Hmm.
really take? So nation state and this whole ideology, which is a much more complex and like school of thought out there,
Hmm.
it talks about what does it really take to create it. Now we're talking at this level, we're talking about a nation state. Before that, the idea was talking about how does a civilization really crop up? Like
Yeah.
what makes a civilization come up, right? Some people have said that hey, land like availability of fresh water and land, and people will just settle there and a civilization will pop up. Then somebody say that hey, availability of opportunities, which is something like a Bangalore, a Flipkart coming in, and something
Hmm.
like that. Then somebody would say that hey, availability of a beneficial geographical location, the entire reason why Delhi was made the capital of India rather than Kolkata. Well, Kolkata was starting as a capital. So people have time and again questioned this, that how and why does a civilization, why do certain number of people gather and decide to settle down there? And nation state as an idea is a very progressive and a natural take on how technology will now come into play on this whole school of thought, on this
Hmm.
philosophy and jamming of that. In that, he talks about blockchain, where he talks about not just the idea why will people settle here, what will bring people together, but it's like how will people really run it amongst themselves,
Yeah.
right? Whether it be the financial mechanisms, how will the flow of money happen between these people, between the different hierarchies and tiers of people?
Hmm.
How will the security, how will the surveillance happen? How will the identity be there? Like, what will they be identified as?
Hmm.
A citizen of this place or a random unique individual identity or of the state in which this is established. So all
Yeah.
of those things, voting mechanisms, So it's a take on the whole demographic level, but not just at democracy, but not just at the governance level. It's
Yeah.
like, hey, how about if the entire society was to run in either a decentralized and at this point, first to start with in a democratic manner and then a decentralized, because we
Hmm.
cannot get to a decentralized manner. We're away from it, a couple of
Yeah.
years away from it right now. What we can say is that, hey, at least if we are not there, how do we get our representatives to
Hmm.
talk about us, right? So that's nation state all about, but I can just go on and in the technology and the jargon of it. But that's probably for another conversation. But that's
Yeah.
the idea where it comes from. Like why people come together, why do they settle, how do they create such societies which are self-sustaining, self-functioning?
Yeah, and I've read about progressive decentralization, right? In fact, this is some kind of a so this theory was always existing, where if you see people still like public companies still have shareholders voting meetings, right? Where they have to vote for a certain thing to either pass or not pass, right? So this kind of a thing was always there. It's just that what I see as a main difference is now the control is and the ownership is with people. Instead, earlier it was the ownership of a third party on which they were voting, right? Where people start, where let's say a country, people start to feel the ownership is inherently theirs. They own a piece of land. However, there are some countries in which people cannot. People just own their house on the top. The land belongs to the government. So the ideological differences is very clear. But I've always been confused about the classic problems of democracy and. I've in fact planned to deep dive onto fixing capitalism as well. But how do you balance?
That.
Uh,
I'll vote
uh,
for you next election, Chirag, if you get that right. You have my vote.
I mean, it is a very scholarly pursuit for me. It's definitely nothing related to
No,
politics,
I
but yeah,
mean, you have to keep questioning that, right? Like,
yeah.
questioning capitalism is as good as and as this is the closest to questioning why are we? Who are we?
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, yeah. So no, going back to
existential.
1950s, the only reason why capitalism exists is because of those two bombs which were dropped. Otherwise, we would have been a different world. We would be living in a very different world. So, in fact, there are some Netflix series as well on which they've shown an alternate world where what if those bombs were not dropped? How would the world be divided between Russia, Japan, and Germany? So it's a fantastic area of exploration. So, but like the classic question always remains, Aditi, is how do you balance the needs of the individual with respect to the needs of the community, right? And that's more like an ethical question or a philosophical question as well. And how do you do that in DAOs? How do you balance the ambitions and freedoms of an individual versus what the community wants? And this is something we experience in most of our joint families, right? The
Yeah.
needs of an individual versus the need of the family.
Family.
So,
Absolutely. I come
I-
from a joint family, little classic. Used
yeah.
to
So,
live in a massive house of seven, like massive house with 17 people together, like three generations.
yeah,
And it was always the question of, hey, do we care more about what other people are going to think of our family, or is it okay to let her wear these kind of clothes because she wants?
absolutely,
So
absolutely,
those questions are very primordial. They start at a level and they go to the level, the highest level that we know of. But how
right.
do we balance, at least in DAOs? I'll tell you a classic problem that I was discussing with a couple of other DAO founders and people who are running very successful monetized DAOs. It was that, hey, the idea of a DAO is that everyone should have the voting power and also the power to raise proposals, create proposals, and all, which makes sense. Now, all of us are out there, and a proposal is raised, say something, just very random example, say something about the health tech policy in India. Now, because we're both part of that DAO, we've actually put in and bought tokens of that DAO, we should have a voting right. But what essentially means is that that DAO needs informed voting on that proposal. But you and I don't know anything about health tech. So we will say that our need is because we bought into a DAO, we have a vote, we will vote. But their need is they get an informed vote on that.
Hmm.
It would essentially mean they don't count your vote. If that doesn't happen, then you say this is denying my right as a decentralized
Correct.
organization member. What do you do then? So then you figure out several tiers and mechanisms, right? Then you don't look at a lean mechanism. It sounds very ideal in a structure where everyone has the same voting power, but you cannot have that. Someone who's more learned, someone who's an expert at an area, someone who knows more needs to have more power, right? Because otherwise you'll be skewing decision or the proposal verdict in a very wrong direction. Every random person will click, and there's so many proposals that are just a yes no,
Correct.
but there's so
Correct.
much information that goes behind, right?
Correct.
You need to create a balance where I will say that, hey, Chirag, yes, you have the vote, but what I'm also going to do is I'm going to classify you an expert on a certain domain. So your vote will count, but your vote will count in a way where in a place where it matters, or where
Hmm.
it has the decision, like where it will count in a way where you can hinge things or you can move the needle in a right direction. We
Hmm.
don't want to blindly count your vote where you're not even the expert on it. You don't even know the right from wrong, right? It's no better than just saying that, hey, your vote counts. I'm going to give you a bottle of alcohol and then you come vote for me. It was
Right.
not an informed vote, which is a very big problem with democracy, right? So we
Right.
need structures. We need these structures, and we also need structures that will help people grow and climb the ladder of coming to a level where your vote counts as much.
Hmm.
So, first, in my opinion, you start when you really, really start. it has to start with the needs of people. When it's a very small community, 10 people coming together, 10 people coming together in a DAO, hey, we've identified a common need. There's no point of making a DAO where all everybody has a different need of their own. That just
Hmm.
doesn't. We have a 10 of us have a common need. We come together, create a DAO, and we try to solve how does this solve our need.
Hmm.
Even if we're not the best people, but we have like the experts on it, we create. Now we have that DAO formed, and we create a culture book, a code of conduct, a roadmap,
Hmm.
like what all are we supposed to do. Now that you know what all is this community supposed to do, is the time where you align and where you say, hey, which is more important right now? Is the DAO goal or is it a person's goal? And what is more ethical? So I think
Right.
the answer lies more on the point of also the initial builders, because they've set the cultural values. They have to be morally and ethically right, but also sound right, like be sound about what it has to do. So I am not a proponent of saying that, hey, run, with free entropy, let everything run and let everyone vote and let everyone have a say, because that will lead to more chaos. The level of
Right.
chaos we will not be able to figure also. What
Right.
identifies people's needs, expertise, say in a DAO? I'm talking just about a DAO. Like country is a very big question.
Sure.
But even that, like the biggest problem that even we say about our democracy is like, hey, someone who doesn't know about roads is a road minister. Someone who doesn't know about IT or electronics is an IT minister. Someone who's not capable in terms of their age is something that, right? We
Hmm.
don't question that, hey, we have a minister. We're okay with it, largely okay with it. We're not okay with that person, their capability and their mindset of running things or taking decisions on our part. The other
Hmm.
problem that I'll tell you on this is that we as people are very idle in our mind. We'll be like, hey, I would like to have the voting right of everything. But what happened was when the DAO movement picked up, people became members of several DAOs.
Yeah.
The problem that we started noting, and this is something that I learned from my conversation with Metacartel and BitDAO founders, like some of the biggest DAOs out there, um, was that they were observing that a lot of people who bought into the tokens to become DAOs and all, they didn't have the time to come and vote. Now they started thinking that I've bought into this DAO, putting in money and token, and now these people are my wealth managers who are going to give me returns on my investment. That is not the point of putting in money. The money that you put there was to indicate a stake that this person has some skin in the game, not as an investment value, right? So we're not, as people also, we have that fault where we will say that, here we want all the right we want, but we don't. We will not be able to do everything for us. If like
Yeah.
the way people have called banks villains, they were not really, right? People probably at some time were trying to do everything on their own. Then somebody came and said, hey, okay, let me make life easier for you and you just pay for me, pay me for doing that. Okay,
Yeah.
of course, there are evils in banks going bankrupt, like the rug pulls in the Web3 domain, all of that. But not all of it is evil. So it needs to be
Yeah.
balanced.
I've also figured out from the limited experience I've had in life is inherently people are lazy, right? So when it comes to DAOs, I am super confused on where from the average daily life there is a commitment to a community, which to the people who I've never met, I've never seen, I have no emotional connect with, apart from putting in money, right? And the visionary goals which are charted out on a piece of paper in the digital space, which may not be there tomorrow. So you see, so I see a very fundamental disconnect between keeping it completely decentralized and all online versus I just feel that a sense of belonging requires physical presence between people, and we are all humans, right? We are not just computer codes where who can operate with a sense of belonging without seeing each other. So that's one fundamental disconnect which I've always found in in the concept of DAOs and operations of DAOs, which are completely online. When I'm sure, just like e-commerce is now primarily pushing towards offline expansion because people need to see, feel, touch, right? Humanize that experience. That way will also come. But but on a very fundamental level, DAOs have always perplexed me with respect to that, how they operate. And I read about this term called quadratic voting. I'm not sure if you're aware of that, but Vitalik himself wrote a paper on quadratic voting where it's not just about putting money behind what you want to say, but putting money exponentially. And that's how much my vote counts. This is a very common parallel to in a capitalistic society, the rich have more say, but we cannot put it on paper, but they have more say because they manipulate the governments, right? So
So
that is a very close
quantitative
parallel.
voting, so Gitcoin, essentially Gitcoin is the biggest platform, like the Gitcoin protocol, which promotes quadratic voting. The other thing also is that I just don't promote, so quadratic, so how I'll tell you why it came into the picture is, I don't want to have maximum votes towards one thing. I want to have maximum votes in itself. My idea is I don't want between 10 thing, one gets a lot of votes, right? And then somebody wins. That's generally the objective of voting, right? That, hey, somebody will win and win by a windfall of sorts.
Yeah,
Quadratic voting is designed in a way where I want to say that more participation comes in. It's something to do with participation economy. So what you're saying is correct. The other way also to look at it is that money goes in a way where maximum votes are also, it optimizes for the number of votes that come in, right?
Correct.
So there's a chance that a project that may not have the maximum votes can also win in the quadratic voting mechanism. There's also quadratic funding mechanism, all of those things.
Yeah.
I'm aware on a like on a more superficial level. I mean, I'm aware, of course, but not in the details of it. But this is the idea that it came up with, and that was the point, that hey, we want more
Hmm.
people to participate,
Hmm.
irrespective of whether they win, whether the outcome comes for them or not. But you're not really going to get anything. You're not going to get any output unless you feed in the right and the maximum inputs.
Yeah, and as you said, right, the people who know the most about a certain thing, they should have the maximum say, right? How and what we are quantifying right now is knowing the most to money, putting my money where my mouth is. How do you quantify knowledge bits in humans? Like, how would you create a very fair ethical system where, let's say, just based on the knowledge part, in a decentralized autonomous organization, people are able to vote, right? And they are allotted a certain number of shares. Do you track their history? Do you track their contributions? What do you do?
Got it. So I think when you look at it, proof of work essentially is a knowledge-driven mechanism, right? I
Mhm.
mean, no random Tom, Dick, and Harry can solve the kind of puzzles that
Right.
are needed, for you to be a validator node to mint a block. So essentially, there was knowledge base. Then they moved to a proof of stake for several reasons. Reasons, something as simple as the amount of energy that it was taking, the amount of
Right.
high transaction fees that it was creating, the level of friction that it was creating into scaling, all
Mhm.
of those things. And then we moved to a proof of stake, where we said that okay, let's make it a more skin in the game. And the idea would be that someone who has made a lot of money on this and has skin in the game, there's a strong thing that they also understand it to a
Hmm.
significant extent, to have made so much tangible wealth out of it, because
Yeah.
it's difficult to quantify knowledge, right? After a point, of course, you can look at contribution and also proof of stake and some of the other models that have come on, pure proof of stake, PPOS, proof of contribution, so proof of work is still there in Bitcoin.
Right.
The others have moved on to it. So I think everybody's optimized for, hey, what are the needs and what is my chain really focusing on? This is an L1
Yeah.
blockchain, L1 mechanism
Yeah.
framework. So they're like, hey, what is my blockchain focused on? Am I focused on heavy security? Am I focused on decentralization, where I need to have a
Hmm.
lot of validator nodes? Am I focused on scalability? Right?
Hmm.
I cannot say that we will reach from 0 to 100 directly in Web3.
Right.
Need to get to that level of scalability, and that will only come. Like there's a very famous trilemma, right, where
Yeah.
you can only achieve two things out of the one.
Right.
Then it's the chain's choice to
Hmm.
figure that, hey, what am I gonna compromise on right now to reach these two, and then see from there and go from there. It's still a very
Yeah.
nascent space. So I think that's the bit where you are, where you were like, okay, this knowledge mechanism is pure, very pious, proof of work. It gives you a lot of decentralization, a lot of security. But if you really want to make it a movement, you need scalability at it. Where do
Yeah.
you get that scalability from? Nobody's going to pay those high transaction fees. Nobody's going to wait for days for the transactions to go through. You need
Correct.
scalability. So
Correct.
people were like, okay, let's do a proof of stake where we don't spend time, effort, whatever on the puzzle bit. We are like, hey, this person has this much proof of stake. Then we'll give them that power and
Yeah.
we'll consider it as the skin in the game.
Yeah.
Now there are chains that are building on initial proof of stake and then a layer of contribution on top. DAOs also essentially do that, which is called reputation management and all of that, because pseudo anonymous identities are a very core part of
Hmm.
it, which has its good and bad again. But I think nobody's really cracked it right. So
Right.
we call ourselves a DAO, but I won't say we are a DAO, honestly.
Mhm.
We're a DAO, which is we're a community on our way to becoming a DAO. If we become a
Yeah.
DAO, honestly, we picked up the DAO name because the username was available.
Well,
Uh,
progressive decentralization
Progressive
then.
section. Yes, because there's so much, right? I mean, the other thing also is we think that we live in an ideal world where we say, oh, people will really relate with a cause, a message, they'll come together, they'll work for it. But you need money to pay them. Where do you get
Yeah.
it? You need to
Exactly.
sustain. And I remember this one conversation that I was having with a VC from Sequoia, and I was talking about DAOs, and I was like, why doesn't Sequoia have a thesis on DAOs and all? And they were like, but who's the visionary leader? So they're like, we believe in the model of having a visionary leader. When things come to the fall, there will be someone who will take a quick decision. Because our thing is taking decision is more important than delaying things.
Correct.
And now you have nice, beautiful council of 8 members. Everybody's passing it on to the other person. Who's that visionary leader? And
Yeah.
that is the base of their thesis on
Even
DAOs.
not even the visionary leader. Like I've always, and this is something which I learned from Apple. They have a system called DRI, which is a directly responsible individual, a person whose ass will be on the line when things go wrong, right? Or let's say there's a fuck up in the supply chain. Who do I bloody fire? Give me one person. I don't see that in DAOs. It's just a part and parcel of responsibilities, right?
Yeah.
So
No, no, absolutely. There are way too many things that need to be built, that need to be experimented, that need to be tried out. And that need to sustain for a while for you to say
There
that, hey,
needs to be a proof of accountability for sure. For
100%. Accountability is a very big problem. Like people will say that, oh, you can have a nice multi-sig account. Smart contract will, something will happen. Smart contract will register it. It will trigger the money. I'm like, not all activities. 1% of the activities are on-chain activities. How
yep,
do I know someone's created the content and I asked them to create for my DAO? And how do I
absolutely.
know they've created good content? And it's not like the 12th class may we used to write like songs and all. So
Right.
DAO is like still far from
Right.
us.
Yeah. Yeah. So quickly jumping back to your community building days at FamPay, right? You grew the community from 5,000 to a million members, and that is quite a feat. And and since we have a audience where a lot of entrepreneurs are still in that journey of growing their communities, what are the key ingredients of the steps? Let's say step one to step three, step four. As how should founders think about community building, whether that's digital or physical, and what would be the go to mantra for that?
Got it. So just first thing here, like it wasn't I who grew it; it was literally all of us because it takes a village, to reach a million users in such a bad analogy. But yeah, so it was the entire team, and I'll have to mention that how quickly all of us would just get aligned, and even if we weren't aligned, then someone would come in and be like, okay, no, this we're doing. Fails, doesn't fail, but we're doing. So,
Yeah.
when we were not able to take a decision, someone would come and take a decision. When he was not able to take a decision, somebody from us will come and say, no, we're doing it. We
Yeah.
don't care. You just give us the money. We're going to go ahead with this event and we're
Yeah.
going to do it. So I think that the other thing also that worked in our favor at that point was that the founders were people who didn't need anything to unlearn. They came right out of college, of organizing college fest. And if you looked into the day-to-day life at FamPay, a lot of the processes were just like they were organizing a college fest. There was a lot of fun to it. There was a lot of agreement for trying out new weird things, for doing a lot of experiments, for shipping fast, for not worrying about, hey, I've worked for 8 hours today. I'm not going to do an extra hour because everybody used to live together. So that was
Hmm.
the life. And there was fun. There was a lot of fun to it.
Yeah.
But there was a lot of quick shipping that was happening. Like lots of weird ideas were getting tried and tested out because everybody was a Gen Z themselves. There were
Hmm.
so many things that would just come out of our own lives, right? And this is just why I'm just giving some like thoughts on why it did well, and I'll come down to the community bit as well. But say something like a streak challenge, a saving streak challenge, that literally came out of the idea of why does everybody follow a Snapchat streak,
Yeah.
right? And if Gen Zs are doing that, what if we picked up that model and put it in a financial same system where you do a saving streak, right? Every day you come and save this much money, and then if you've done it for 10 days, of course you have all of your saved amount and the interest on top of it, but also a reward for doing it for those 10 days straight.
Right.
A
Right.
lot of those thoughts came from personal experiences, right? And personal alignment. Now, in terms of the community building bit, see, I think I have to give credit to also the circumstances, the timing, the market at that point, right?
Hmm.
Also, FamPay being first of its kind, right?
Yeah.
Today, if someone tries, they're going to face a bit of an issue where somebody will say, hey, FamPay's there, they've done this better, they have more offers, whatever, they have better cards and delivery. But at that point, there was nobody. The only
Hmm.
comparison was your traditional bank's complimentary cards, which nobody knew about and
Hmm.
nobody was using. And then in my mind, I have this mental framework, right, which I essentially say when you want to build something, which comprises of three things: is there intent, is there education and awareness to do something in a user, and do they have the product to do that, right? Now, when if you look at the Gen Z segment, they had the intent to have a card of their own and do digital transactions and everything. They
Right.
had the education. In fact, they were the people doing UPS for their moms and then ordering online for e-commerce for their dads. So the
Correct.
education was there. What was not there was literally the product at that time,
Hmm.
which is such a
Hmm.
sweet spot to be in. And Fanba was like, okay, cool. You have the intent, you have the awareness. I'm going to come and build the product.
Right.
Because why I can draw this parallel is because I came from Carva, where we were building fintech product for the underserved and unserved audiences. And I realized how much of an effort and how much I would get frustrated about not getting to build or innovate on the product because so much of our time would just go into like awareness and education of it. While
Hmm.
Gen Zs, they knew all of it. You just had to give them the product, one onboarding session, and they'd know how to do the KYC, how to send money, what all every icon meant on that screen. That was a
Yeah.
struggle for us to educate, women from factories that hey, this
Yeah.
means send, this means deposit, things like those. So that was there. So the timing, the market was really ripe for
Hmm.
it. Second thing was it was a status driven thing, right? A kid having a card of their own with a name of their own. We'd all observe the whole flexing, the need for flexing in Gen Zs and in everyone else, right? Whether it be with
Hmm.
thrifted clothes, whether it be having Slay coffee and stuff like that. So now if you
Yeah.
give them a product which gives them a very shareable social status identity, because Gen Zs don't have a lot of things, right? Kya kare?
Hmm.
They don't have cars of their own, houses of their own, or bank balances of their own. They need something to
Yeah.
give that identity. So that thing also added a lot. Third thing was the entire COVID, right? FamPay literally growth and GTM started in March 2020, which was the time where the curfew happened. A lot of Gen Z kids, who are their friends really? Either people who they meet in school or people in their locality. 80% of the friends in their life are those people, right? The touch was out, like they weren't touch. with them. They were not meeting their neighbors. They were not going to the school. They'd become active on social media. They wanted to
Yeah.
learn things here. They wanted to do a lot of activities. That's where in our club section, the community activities, the gamification, the raffles, the master classes, the interviews with IITians and all really helped. Second thing was they'd again become active on socials, but not just social media, social, but also say on email because their
Hmm.
classes were happening. So now we could actually give out a lot of automated email courses. That was actually one of the best performing campaigns for us was the Teen Influencer campaign, which was an ambassador program where we were giving them sort of weekly daily education classes for 4 weeks on how to build your social media brand. So
Yeah.
FinPay for the longest time did not even register itself on the fintech app section on Play Store. We were on
Wow.
the lifestyle app section.
Wow.
The idea was we want to engage Gen Zs, and fintech will just be a means to an end that they can
Right.
also transact here itself. But let them come and buy things. Let them also look at the offers here. Let them also look at the master classes here. Let them also look at the saving offers
Hmm.
sort of here. So the whole COVID period really helped with that, where digital transactions boomed. And
Hmm.
when they did, so many Gen Zs had the need to be able to pay digitally, and so many parents were working from their house and had their kids asking for OTPs and all. And
Right.
the other thing was the inbuilt security because it was a prepaid card, right? So it
Hmm.
was easier to sell. That a lot of times parents would ask questions like, "Hey, is this not going to make my kid very money minded? She's constantly going to think about money every day." I'm like, no, because inherently we're going to build models where education is before spending every single way. For the longest time, FamPay did not incentivize or optimize for people paying, right? It optimized for people saving,
Got
people
it.
like getting education and all. So I
Got
think
it.
those are some of the things which became the USP, which made the selling very easy, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
The other thing that we picked up on was, hey, you have to give your kids pocket money every month because your kid is spending in cash. So these were the selling points for the kids. Now for the
Hmm.
parents, they were like, it's such a hassle to give them pocket money every month. When you're spending in cash, you can't even see what they're spending on, but you can still get somewhat of an idea. More than
Hmm.
1,000. Initially, we also had that feature of a fam wallet, a family wallet, also where more than 1,000 if a Gen Z, if a kid spends, the parent would get a notification and stuff like that. Also,
Hmm.
inherently, your kid is getting educated about how to manage their finances and all. So
Yeah.
it was a sell. It was a good sell there. Now, beyond that, I think some of the activities that we did at that point, right? We realized ambassador programs were success, but they'd always only been done for college students. Nobody did it for school students. We're like, okay, we're going to do that. We also first provided people with what they needed, right? We did not provide them a financial literacy course, but a social media brand course first.
Yeah.
We did that first. Then we were like, okay, what do they want? Do they want cool doodles on their card? Okay, it's okay if that's not the industry norm to have a very doodlish card. We'll give that doodle out on a card if they want it. If Chirag wants a camera or a headset or I don't know, even a skateboard as a doodle on his card, he'll have that.
Yeah. That's like 101 understanding the customer and their needs, right?
Absolutely. I think founders themselves, being the entire team was Gen Z. Even the people who we hired were Gen Zs. So the
Absolutely.
process was, I was like, okay, I want to hire 10 interns and I'm going to hire
Yeah.
them one from BITS, one from DU, one from IT. I said, okay, that's 5 Gen Zs we'll hire. And we were
Yeah.
like, okay. We were like, the only job they'll have is to just tell us what are the trends, what are the social media trends, what are the kids buying, what are they liking and all.
And in fact, most of the people, if you hire the same audience which you're trying to serve, they don't even need to go out and do focus group research, right? They can just intermingle among themselves. Hey, bro, this is what I saw.
Happening every day. And what we
Wow.
realized, they actually were some of the best worker bees that we could have at that time, honestly. Like they were brought in to actually provide a lot of feedback, but they ended up doing so many things. Like one random example that I remember was someone was like, hey, why don't, schools are not doing these annual competitions and all, and kids are really missing out on that because that's the only time they get to show what they're good at and
Yeah.
like show off.
Yeah.
Let's do something like that. We were like, okay. So then Fam Jam was birthed. Then that person was like, people would really want to participate in this. Let's host the registration form in the app. So
Hmm.
that competition actually became an app acquisition where people came and actually downloaded the app to sign up for that form, which was so random. I would have
Wow.
never thought that I would do that or a Gen Z would do that. I am a borderline Gen Z
Yeah.
myself. But it was these weird thoughts and ideas and the team's alignment to do a lot of experiments. Every
Yeah.
week we were running some 5-10 experiments. And how that was automated was that no tech debt. You want to use
Yeah.
anything, you want to use Zapier, you want to use any random no code tool, you do that. But you will not go to the tech team to ask them
Absolutely.
to do
Yeah,
this.
because the number of
Zapier.
experiments these Gen Z comes up with, and the kind of tech debt that that could accumulate, if everyone started to try, that would be the doom of the company. But yeah, yeah, these are like
Absolutely.
MVPs, right?
Plus, in your users, if you identify right who have the higher potential to become a power user or influence more people, that also
Right.
helps. So one of our programs, what we did was we didn't go after every Gen Z. We went after school prefects because in a
Okay.
school, the most influential people are school prefects, right? If a
Hmm.
school prefect goes and says that, hey, I am a family ambassador and I'm going to invite you to this app. Will you come and join? It's like a crazy thing now because I have first-hand experience that when I was a head girl It was so cool, everything that I was doing. Like even the stupid hairstyle that I would put would be cool at that point. So also being able to correctly like figure out the correct user persona, but in that user persona also figuring out that here with the limited resources bandwidth that we have, who is a better, a potential high value user or a high influence user
Hmm.
that you can go after, and then they can pull in more people for you. So
Right.
that calculation and that thought behind, hey, where does the virality really lie? Where does what is the viral coefficient that we're targeting for? A lot of math also went into it. But yes, that's the boring parts. But
Yeah.
a lot of things takes this, but I think it was also the right timing. It was a lot of out of the box initiatives, but not just thinking of those initiatives, actually taking them to the final leg of execution. So many times we didn't see any result come until the ninth stage, and then it blew up at nine, and then 10
Wow.
is a crazy number. So yeah.
That's so interesting. So, what would be the most controversial experience you've had in your startup journey?
I think it would be EF because I had sort of a mixed experience. That's because of my own personal entrepreneurial values. And that was because I come from a school of thought, which is the agile bit, right? That when you want to start building something, you take as much time as you want to actually figure out
Correct.
what you want to do. And then you take up speed. There
Correct.
it was like, hey, in 2 days, you have to find a co founder. You have to build on an idea or a case or a customer development process with them. You don't like them, you change the founder. And to me, it was not helping. Where I was like, I was constantly in a conflict with my ideology and with the ideology that a proven incubator has. Now, which
Hmm.
is right, which is working for me. And there's no universal right in such cases, right? It's like
Correct.
what is right for me. I think
Correct.
that. And I think also the second bit where I learned a lot from that experience, from that exercise to identify that, hey, I can be heavily or entirely driven by passion, but that does not mean that I will be able to crack it. So I need to be cognizant of where does my skill lie? Is it reachable for me? Am I shooting for the moon and not even landing on a planet, let alone the
Hmm.
stars sort of situation?
Hmm.
So I think that bit of a reality check
Hmm.
sort of seemed controversial. All the conversations around there, it was also a little bit hurtful when someone tells you that, Aditi, you're not the right person to do this. This is not going forward. This is not moving
Yeah.
anything. Yeah. But I came out learning, but it took months to really come
Yeah.
to learning. But everything before that was a battle every single day.
But I'm sure you've had some crazy experiences at the World Economic Forum as well. So, what would be the key things that you really took back and things which are super uncommon?
I think one thing is people are same everywhere, right? Whether it be a very high profile event like World Economic Forum or whether it be a Nukkar meetup, there will always be a lot of people who are hyping things up and exaggerating so much that they could be a millionaire and you would still be able to see through their shit. That was something I was like, okay, it's the same everywhere. Nothing changes.
You saw a lot of stories similar to
A lot
this.
of, not a, but significant, yes. There were a lot of people, and I don't consider myself the smartest person or the person who has the most experience also. But if I could feel like, oh, I'm able to see through this person's shit, then they're literally shitting, right? Because
Shilling for no reason, huh?
yeah, shitting for no reason, shitting for no good reason, bullshitting for no good reason, all of those kind of things. Also, the thing was that was another negative. Second thing was like a lot of impact driven conversations. Like the whole identity of World Economic Forum is built on that. But in real conversations are done with are driven by monetary incentives because these are people with money and
Hmm.
power. That's all. These
Hmm.
are not people. All of them are not people who have impact at their heart. Not
Hmm.
majority of them. That's what I learned.
Correct.
Even the one who progress or even the one who like sort of show that they do, they don't. They didn't.
Correct.
Like very few people had that, and a lot of monetary incentives were into play. A lot of power play was happening. There was a power law in evidence there. But that's the negative side, which is sort of almost known to the world that it's super expensive. You will see some sort of stereotyping for
Hmm.
say an Indian founder or a female founder or something like that.
Hmm.
Diversity is really bad. It's very, very skewed, like the
Hmm.
ratios. I was surprised that I felt like I was amongst the very few young people, and even fewer young women out there. But there are also several positives to it. One is like you have the decision makers there. So whatever
Right.
conversations happen, you don't have to go back to someone and check internally, right? The
Yeah.
decision will happen there. People are like, oh, we're doing this, cool, let's sign it here. I've actually seen that happen in person where on day two, somebody talked about something and we were all hanging out together. And day four, they actually signed up on that contract. And
Wow.
it was a massive deal that happened.
So
So
people put money behind their mouth.
yes,
That's
absolutely. So Jindal Steel was involved in this conversation, and then they came in with an idea, but they actually converted it. This was a steel export deal to some country that they weren't in business with before.
wow.
So at that level, so just the aspect that there's so many decision makers there. There are also a lot of alpha. Like if you
Hmm.
are someone who's an alpha whore, you would love it. So many things you'll hear, you'll get to know, and you'll be like, really? This is happening? Oh, this company is doing this. Oh, this person's doing that. Oh, this government's doing that. So a lot of alpha.
Tell me a couple of things which really blew your mind, which are of course non-confidential.
Most of them are confidential, honestly. Most of them are on the side of the smart city project that I was working with. I'm like, oh, this is also happening. This is all. This person, this company is also a partner. Really, that. And yeah, I think that is a bit which I need to watch my mouth.
But
Uh,
what else can you expect from World Economic Forum? It's where the most interesting minds with most power and money
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Just
collaborate,
down
right?
to the deepest pockets, honestly. Like
Yeah,
they were there. I had such funny and fun experiences. There was this one time where so Mr. Jindal, Sajan Jindal was on the same table, and I was also sitting there, and I knew that JSW Group owns Bangalore FC.
correct,
I'm a football fan,
correct.
and I just went on and ranted about Indian football and this and that.
You did that in front
I
of
didn't know he was
Mr.
Sajjan
Jindal.
Jindal. Okay, I didn't know this guy Sajjan Jindal. And I'm saying, and I'm going on and on and on and on. And then he's like, huh, so what do you think we should do? And I'm like, we to sab, all citizens say we. I'm like, yeah, we should do this. Then he left. I left. And then the other person's like, do you know who this person is? I'm like, oh. And then we just started
He's the bloody owner.
and then I was like, he's Mr. Sajjan Jindal. And I'm like, sir, let's click a picture. Literally, that happened. Another
Wow.
time, so I am really bad with chopsticks. I'm a vegetarian. I'm a Jain. I don't like Asian food, so I don't know how to eat with chopsticks. There was this another time where somehow I ended up on a very high profile lunch table, and Vijay Shekhar Sharma was sitting right in front of me. And now they serve ramen bowls or something like that. And I'm like, okay, now I need to eat it because it was a global lunch
Mhm.
cuisine, something like that. And I didn't know how to do that. So I think he understood that because I was doing things wrong. And then he actually quietly demoed the whole thing for me that, ऐसे करो. तो वो बोल नहीं रहे थे, वो बस कर रहे
Wow.
थे. I'm sitting there and I'm doing that. I actually have a picture on my Instagram on the same
That
day.
is, isn't
Uh,
that cool to learn how to use chopsticks from the founder of Paytm?
yes, yes. So that happened. Then there was also Mr. Ashwini, our cabinet minister, IT minister, and he was one of the most phenomenal people out there. So everybody was like, "Hey, let's click picture," and then you don't expect a minister to come out and say, "Hey, that I will not click a picture with you, but I'll give you my valuable time." And then
Right.
he was like, I remember there were a couple of us, and then one of the people would have asked, and he was like, "अरे ये सब क्या करना? चलो, TSCS ने वहाँ free चाय का stall लगाया. Let's go have that free chai in
Huh.
Davos at World Economic Forum and still talking about a free chai. And this is your cabinet minister. And then the kind of questions that you were asking, right, very relevant to World Economic Forum. And India had
Right.
like a very strong presence at World Economic Forum this year. From Maharashtra having the costliest, the most expensive pavilion, which is called the Russian House, because only
Mhm.
Russia is the country that can have that building. But Russia was not there this year, so
Wow.
Maharashtra government had it. There were several country pavilions, and India had a country pavilion and four other state pavilions as well.
Wow.
Questions that he asked was, what do you think of India's presence here? What are people talking about India to you? Do you think that relevant people are coming to the India Lounge? He was not talking about random shit thing. He was talking about the very contextual event and what we were trying to do there as
Yeah.
Indians together. I also remember meeting Miss Smriti Irani, and there I asked her a question that, hey, we cannot pick up one example of something and then say that, hey, this has been rolled out over throughout the country, or pan country or pan
Right.
India, because that's one example and all. And then she asked me, what would you suggest? And randomly gave out this thought that, Man Ki Baat has all of this newsletter data, all these email IDs, and you have the capability. Why aren't you taking really smart women founders to these women?
Hmm.
Talk to them in Hindi rather than talking
Hmm.
like polished English. Ask relevant questions कि मुझे ये
Correct.
बेचना है, मुझे साइट बनानी है, तो मैं किस पे जाके बनाऊं? Stuff like
Correct.
that.
Correct.
And I was surprised that when the day I had this discussion, second day, the person who's responsible for Startup India initiative within Invest India and all, they reached out. They're like, hey, Miss Smriti Irani was mentioning, and your contact was taken, and I want to have a chat with you. Are you still around? And I chatted with them, and with several conversations that they happened. Super 3 as a podcast was born, which Super 3 is a podcast by the Indian government right now, which is for women founders, by women founders. Not a lot of people may know about it, but I think women should because they're really inviting some stellar Indian women founders out there, and then they're talking about their journeys and all.
Wow,
So
that is so
all
cool.
things come out if you're the right
Hmm.
person. I landed a really massive, a very interesting gig for myself.
Hmm.
Met some very interesting people. Signed an MOU with the CM of Maharashtra standing next to me. So stellar, honestly.
That is insane. World Economic Forum is a place to go then. I'll definitely plan my visit and please
You
help me
should
out
go
in
this
that.
year, man, for sure. Like now's the
Are you
time.
plan to attend?
Most likely, yes.
Most likely, yes. Perfect. Perfect. Then I'll try and see you there. Well, this has been amazing. Yeah. So as a closing note, Aditi, your story has been stellar. What are in all this journey? I'm sure you've, and I'm a very big proponent of reading. What are some of the books that have really impacted your career, or some podcasts, or some series, or YouTube, or Netflix, anything? Where is your go-to content needs come like satisfied by?
God, I used to be a book person. Now I'm not really. I'm not able to make time. And I don't have books that have impacted my life, but I have one book that's impacted my life so much that, probably the day my kids are born, that's the first thing I'm going to give them. That Ghar Chodo Jayega Chodo Ye book le lo tum. That's called Making of a Manager. It's by Julie Zhao. And when I was at FAMPE, the one difficulty, the one challenge that I had personally was delegating because I'm
Hmm.
not the most patient person, right?
Hmm.
I'll tell someone something once, twice, third time, I'll be like, chuck it, I'll do it. But in the long term, that doesn't serve me because then I end up with a lot of work, a plate full, and I don't know how to manage that then.
Right.
Rather, if I had taught that person that thing, then I wouldn't have to deal with it. And that's when Samba was like, hey, there's this book, Making of a Manager. Julie
Yeah.
Zhao was the first product manager at Facebook and a product designer at Facebook. And that book is very conversational. It actually talks about circumstances that, hey, how do you have a hard conversation, say maybe about a bad, a review to a
Hmm.
supervisor, to a person that you are managing, to a
Yeah.
colleague of the same level, to high leadership. How do you bring out certain things, but in a very polite way? How do you
Yeah.
be stern? How do you say no? How do you actually delegate work? How do you have people stick to timelines?
Yeah.
Everything in a very conversational format. I think that really, really helped me because I remember using this exact same sentences several times, after
Hmm.
that. And I still have difficulty with delegation, but I think I'm a lot better than what I was back then. So yeah, this is one book that I would
That's
recommend.
fantastic. That is fantastic. There's another book by Tim Ferriss, which is like a 4-day work week, which
Oh
talks
yeah,
about
I've read that
delegating.
one. Yes, I
What
have
a
read
book!
that one. What a book,
Yeah,
honestly.
that book technically has motivated a lot of people not to work.
It
Yeah,
is
like
about how do you make money while sleeping? How do you actually automate a lot of things?
right,
And that's so true. I think these frameworks, also not books per se, but I think Lenny Richardsky's works in the early days helped me a lot.
right,
Um, at a certain time, I used to read them a lot. Currently in Web3, it's A16Z's Crypto School and the
right.
Define, which is a newsletter those are the two things that I make it a point to at least read. Everything else, I miss out.
Makes sense. But this has been fantastic, Aditi. I hope the conversation was worth a while. And thank you so much for taking out your precious time. And thank you everyone from the Sign Up Spot. I'm sure a lot of people will reach out to us with respect to follow up questions about your journey or things that you've talked about. And I will make sure that these questions reach you.
Awesome. Thank you so much,
This
Chirag.
has been great. Thanks a lot, Aditi. Have a great day.
You too. You too. Thank you.
See you. Bye bye.